about 25 years now, and I got very interested in the potential candidacy of Sherrod Brown for president, and I have been working with their draft Sherrod Brown committee, and they would like me to identify people who are interested in helping with that effort. I know it's kind of early, but I'm sitting right over here. If you're interested, come over and let's talk, and I can get some contact information from you. Thanks very much.
Marty, do you have the microphone?
So I'm right here, I'm the timekeeper.
Okay, this is, if you have a question, you can send it up here to this table at the front with Alex and Nick. Also, we have audience questions already that have been looked at, and so we can't ask every question, but we will do our best to ask as many as we can to every candidate. Each candidate will get 2 minutes for introduction, then we'll have the Q&A, then we'll give them 1 minute for closure. Again, at 11 o'clock, we have the House District 9 reorg, so we're kind of on a tight schedule. We want to try to meet that timeline so the next meeting can be set up and started on time as well. Okay, here we go. Do you have any questions for me before we start? Okay. And let me introduce our candidates. We have Lisa Calderon, we have Penfield Tate, and we have Jamie Giellis. Okay.
Giellis.
Oh, Giellis. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Giellis. Okay. Okay, so if each of you would take 2 minutes each to introduce yourself. We have a timer here at the front. It's Betsy.
All right, let's see. I don't know, can you all hear me? Is this on? All right, good morning, everyone. I'm close. That's
Yes.
close. Okay, Good morning. I'm Lisa Calderon, and I'm running for Denver mayor. It's wonderful to see so many folks out today. I want to thank HD9 for hosting us here. I have lived just about in every quadrant of this city, but not this one. However, I do have family here who's present who do live in this part of the city, so I'm glad that they've turned out, as well as my campaign manager, Ashley Wieland, who's here. You're going to hear a lot about the issues around affordable housing and transportation, but fundamentally the issues that I'm concerned about looking at this race through a justice and equity lens is restoring power to the people. Over the past several years and successive mayors, the people have had a diminished voice in the future direction of our city. And so I want to make sure that we get heard. We only have 73 more days until the next election, and it is going to be an incredibly pivotal election because it's going to determine, are the people going to be in charge, or are the corporate developers going to continue to run our city? Because right now, that's what this race has been matching up, the battle between the developers. My campaign is a grassroots campaign to give power to the people on the grassroots level. So I am going to look at issues of equity, fairness, and justice. I will talk more about that in a moment, but I encourage you to join me in a grassroots effort to be able to restore the democratic processes. And as a lifelong Democrat who's been very active in our public and our community forums, I would really appreciate your support. So thank you so much.
Good morning, House District 9. My name is Penfield Tate. I'm glad to be here with you today. First, let me thank all of you for being here because, like many of you, I have been working on the ground at the grassroots as a precinct committee person for a number of years and as co-captain in House District 8B. So I appreciate the work you are doing. I'm a former state legislator. I worked for Mayor Pena. I worked for Governor Romer. I have the background and experience, and more importantly, as many of you have seen me over the years, I have gotten things done. And we need to get things done in this city right now. We have wasted too much time. We need to address the crisis in that we don't have enough affordable housing in different quadrants and areas of this city because we're not requiring developers to build it. Development is happening to us and not being done with and for us. And as your mayor, I'll change that. We need to address what is our greatest, in my opinion, civic embarrassment, the plight of the homeless or the unhoused in this community. As your mayor, my commitment is working with not only the nonprofit sector, but for-profit and other service agencies. We're going to get the homeless off the street in the first 100 days. Third, it takes forever to get around Denver on the streets, and not just because it snowed today. But generally speaking, I'll establish and come to you, the voters, to establish a new Department of Transportation to focus on mobility for Denver, solutions for Denver. And finally, what I would say is, being mayor is about being there because the world is run by those who show up. I'm here to take your questions, to present to you, to ask for your vote, unlike some candidates who I heard canceled at the last minute because they didn't want to come here and talk to you. I'll always be here to talk to you. Thank you very much. Penfield Tate.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Giellis, and I'm a candidate to be your next Denver mayor. And this municipal election is coming fast, so I want to set myself apart from the pack real quick. First of all, I'm the only candidate that is out there working in the neighborhoods on the ground right now, fighting for better solutions with the city, doing the work for the people. Second, I'm the only candidate that went to school to be a city manager and has spent my entire career working with local governments, bridging the gap with community all around the world. State, local, national governments, problem solving on issues related to urban policy and growth. This campaign for me is about the people. You've heard that. It's about putting people first. It is about focusing on our quality of life, which is Denver's obligation to all of us by the decisions that the city makes. It's about economic sustainability, and that means giving everybody opportunity here through good jobs, good wages, housing, and that's what gets us quality of life. It's about inclusiveness, setting a big table. It's about your city being an advocate for you and neighborhoods, not creating adversarial situations. And it's about ethical leadership and accountability and transparency, personally and professionally, and that is non-negotiable. I have 4 specific things I'm focusing on. You're going to hear a lot of this today. Growth. It's the #1 issue. Growth is going to happen to us, so it's how it happens. It is how we make developers do better, not let them build the hell out of this city. It is about transit. We have a regional system that serves us. We do not have a local system. We've been talking about it for 20 years. We need to start building transit, and it's going to be hard, but we need to do it. Attainable housing, green space in our sustainable environment, and making sure we have leadership that serves the people first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Here's your first question, and we'll start with Ms. Calderon. Okay, you've just been elected mayor. What are your top 3 priorities on day 1?
Is this 2 minutes?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. So my top priority is first getting people into office who actually know what they're doing and not having cronies who helped my political office. So having people who actually know how to run this city and not are beholden to corporate developers who are funding our campaigns. I'm also dedicated to looking at issues of equity across our neighborhoods, so giving our residents a greater voice. I'm about resident-led development. So having you all tell us what is it, because you're the experts in your neighborhoods, what is it that you need, that we need to be responsive to? And then also making sure that we have a anti-displacement policy so that we are preserving the people who live here, who have raised their families here, who are set to retire here, can stay in this city. So I would prioritize those three things. Thank you so much.
Day one, we'll hit the ground running because from the time of the election to the time of inauguration, I will have my executive team in place because all of you will have helped me select the right people to lead Denver's future. We will hit the ground running. Priority number one, as I said before, in the first 100 days, we're going to work with others, form a coalition, implement our plan, and get the homeless off the street. I want them sheltered and protected before the first winter comes. Number two, we're going to sit down with developers and with city council and talk about the priorities for this city, affordable, attainable housing throughout the city. That we're going to tell the developers, new game, new ground rules, no waivers, no variances, no incentives, unless you start building what our neighborhoods need. Third point, we're going to sit down and start putting together the task force to implement the Department of Transportation for the city and county of Denver, because we need Denver-based solutions for Denver mobility issues. RTD can't do it and won't do it anymore because they're more focused on the suburbs.
Three big things. Number one, we've talked a lot about development and growth, and a lot of it goes back to zoning and how neighborhoods are having a voice. We need to fix our zoning. Yes, we can have a conversation with developers, but our zoning and the way that community planning and development is run is not working. We need to fast track neighborhood planning because that's how you give neighbors a voice. Neighborhood planning is in process, but right now it's 15 years until every neighborhood gets a plan. So we need to make that happen and fast track it. Number two, we do need to start building transit. We've talked about it, there is a plan. We need to start implementing the way that we're gonna fund it. And that has to start from day one if we're actually gonna build transit anytime in the next decade. And number three, we need to fix the broken housing situation. Pull it out of the Office of Economic Development, put it under the charge of the mayor, figure out how we're gonna use those millions of dollars of funds that are sitting there and create opportunities for affordable developers, including private affordable developers, to have tools to get housing built.
Here's your next question, and we'll start with Mr. Tate. If you were elected, how would you address the overwhelming support to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour?
I'd address it very easily. I support it also. I support 15 at DIA. I support the city working with our legislative delegation to enable cities to set their own minimum wage. I'm the only candidate, I believe, who supports allowing our civilian city employees to unionize and collectively bargain. It works for the police, it works for the sheriff, it works for fire. It'll work for civilian employees, and if properly constructed, you'll get the services you need, we'll get the accountability we need, so I support that overall. I do not think it will isolate Denver and make Denver an island. It's about a living wage for people who work and live in this city. Jamie, you're right. I didn't go to school to learn how to do city management. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks when I worked for our Mayor Federico Pena, who instituted a program of incorporating neighborhoods as an integral part of what our city looks like. That's where I went to grad school. That's where I got my education. That tradition, that history that has helped build Denver to make it what it is now is what I'm going to rely upon, being responsive to you in the community and always being accountable and being here because it's your mayor's office, not mine.
I support an increase in the minimum wage. Absolutely, we need to bring wages up. And I learned from the School of Hard Knocks too, Penfield. I have worked on the ground. I also know that if we're gonna increase wages, and if we want our businesses to increase wages, then we have to be a business-friendly city. We put businesses through the ringer, getting permitting done, getting open, and we provide very little support to small businesses. It's expensive to open a small business here. So we can help businesses do better. They can in turn pay better wages, and we all benefit. I also am a supporter of allowing city employees to unionize and collectively bargain. We have to address this missing middle situation in which the rich are getting richer and the rest of us are struggling. And that comes through doing a lot of different things. But we can't just increase wages unless we also find ways to support everybody's ability to provide those wages to people. So it's multifaceted. You can't do one without looking at the other.
So before I got my master's degree, my law degree, my doctorate in education, I was a single parent on welfare years ago who actually was on minimum wage and who took my baby to Washington, D.C. to fight to increase the minimum wage with other workers from across the nation. So this isn't just something that is an academic approach for me. This is something that I have learned. I know what it's like to struggle to put food on the table. I organized with unions and stood up for union rights before I ran for public office. And so it isn't true that there's only one candidate here who supports collective bargaining. I've worked in Denver's jails for 8 years running the reentry program, and I stood with those union workers for better conditions and better pay so that we have safer jails. So, be very aware of when people are coming on the scene now and telling you how much they've done for this community. I have been fighting for better wages, for affordable housing for the past over 10 years and challenging specifically this administration for the past 8 years about their inequitable policies that are resulting in redlining of our communities, not so much based on race, but also on class, in which those of us who cannot work and live in the city are being pushed out. So don't believe the hype. You got a genuine person here who's been organizing for the past 30 years in Denver.
Wait, just one question. Are these all going to be a minute and a half now, or one?
Yes, 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Yeah. We compromised. She said 1 minute, I said 2, and then
So this question is about some verbiage that was voted in last year at the Denver Democratic Assembly of Delegates. It says, quote, "We believe the economy should run democratically owned and controlled in order to serve the needs of the many and not for the profits of the few. Have you read the platform of the Democratic Party of Denver, and how will you uphold these ideals once you are mayor?"
Yes, I have, and I think it goes back to a lot of what you've heard us talking about, is that it's about putting people first in this process. It's about bringing in leadership that isn't beholden to the development community and that's out communicating with the people. We have to engage with our residents, our citizens, our neighborhoods to understand what's right for the city. And as I started to say in my opening pitch, we have to decide, this is a moment right now in which we need leaders who are both visionary and compassionate to people. We have to decide if our legacy as a city is going to be about growth and development and the money it brings, or whether we have the courage to elect leadership who is going to champion people and truly put them first in the process, who is going to lead, not respond to problems, and who is going to be looking ahead at what's coming down the road and making sure we're working towards solutions now, not waiting for people to feel the pain of what comes with a growing city. I've been an advocate for that all along. It's been my whole career. It's not just about what's happening now, it's about what's coming. And we, as your leaders, need to be preparing for that and protecting you against the difficulties that come with growing urban environments.
Not only have I read them, I have lived them. I have been a lifelong Democrat, and this is starting with my mother, who's here today, who had me on the picket line at a very young age. That was democracy at work, and we were standing up for migrant farm workers. So we live it, we just don't read it. And part of those principles are rooted in equity and social justice. These are the principles in which my campaign is built upon. So when we are fighting for the underdog, when we are fighting for the voiceless, when we are promoting civil rights principles, these are Democratic Party principles. I was asked here by we talked about with the chair of HD9 about appealing to independent voters. We know that Denver and Colorado is turned blue, and I'm proud of that, to be a progressive in that fight. And how we appeal to independent voters is to hold up our ideals of fairness, equity, and justice, the pillars of my campaign. So we need to be proud Democrats and proud members of the electoral process. And if you are wondering about that, look at our voting histories. That will tell you part of what you need about who has been engaged in the electoral politics in this city. So not only must we read it, we must act, we must do it, and to realize it for particularly the underprivileged and the marginalized in our communities. Those are the principles of the Democratic Party that I'm proud to uphold. Thank you.
In direct response to your question, I think the answer is yes and yes. And not only do I support and agree, like many of you as a PCP, as a co-captain, I helped write over the years these principles and these policies. I chaired county and state party committees. I served as a state party officer for the Colorado Democratic Party to make sure that the values we live, that we support, get articulated and put forth to our elected officials. Then not only did I help write them, as an elected official, one of your elected officials, I helped implement them and give them life. I spent 6.5 years, 4 years in the minority of the House, and trust me, that was never fun. But getting legislation passed every year, and as I used to say, sometimes if I didn't win the vote for you, I won the argument, because it was important that our principles get articulated, get defended, and put forth in front of this community. At the end of the day, being mayor is about tending to the human infrastructure of the city. A lot of people focus on big stuff and building big things, but if I'm not making the city better for you each and every day, it doesn't matter how much big stuff gets built. What matters is whether your life is better because of my service as mayor to you. So yes, and thank you.
Okay, here's the next question. How would you specifically manage the crisis that is homelessness? And there's a second part. How will you deal with the public health issues if right to rest or to survive passes?
Unlike the other candidates for mayor on this panel, I have actually been homeless. As a young person who escaped domestic violence in our home, we know that for young people, this is often the reason why they are forced to leave home. As the only service provider who's on this panel who actually has worked in the trenches with people with mental illness, with people with addictions, who provided services, who we fought to get housing and treatment where there were no resources in this city, day in and day out. I did that as a legal director working with survivors who were escaping abuse and found themselves homeless, and I did that for 12 years. Or doing it running the city's reentry program for 8 years. So I know the pain of homelessness. Regarding the right to survive, I think that there are problems in terms of the broadness of it, but I support the principles that it is forcing this leadership to deal with the issues of homelessness, addiction, and mental health instead of kicking it down the road. So the way our city is approaching homelessness is immoral. Criminalizing homelessness doesn't make it better. In fact, it makes it worse. By pushing people into our jails and prisons, we are not treating them. We are making the problem worse in all of our neighborhoods because it's not staying in one location. So I, as mayor, would have comprehensive homelessness prevention issues, problems, and resources that we would be addressing that rather than just kicking the can down the road into your neighborhoods. Thank you.
As your mayor, one of the first things I'll do is stop the homeless sweeps. They're ineffective, they're inefficient, they're inhumane, and it makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to pay a private contractor just to harass people who are on the street because they can't afford, in many instances, to live in this city. This is a difficult issue. This is one I've made a commitment to, as I've told you, to move the homeless off the street within the first 100 days. But we need to understand the population we're talking about. Depending on who you talk to, as many as 40% of the homeless work full time. They just can't afford to rent or buy in this community. There are people who work a full shift at the VA hospital, leave the hospital, and sleep in their cars because they can't rent or buy in this community. So we need to help stabilize this population. My plan is, and we're already putting it together, we're already meeting with shelters, we're already meeting with homeless providers. We'll have a multifaceted plan to move the homeless into either shelters, temporary housing, whether it's mini homes, whether it's some other temporary housing. We may look at some outdoor encampments, but we'll get the homeless off the street in the first 100 days. I appreciate the sentiment of the right to rest legislation. It is my intention to make it irrelevant because we're not going to worry about people living in parks or people being swept off the street. We're going to place them to allow them to be warm, sheltered, have services, and begin to stabilize their lives to transition back into society.
So I have said from the beginning that whether or not Right to Survive passes, we need a plan. Right to Survive is an outcome of homeless advocates being frustrated that there is nothing happening. And I know that because I've been one of those homeless advocates. 2.5 years ago, I co-hosted an event called Move Along to Where. 600 people from across the city showed up to talk about what solutions we were going to do. The tiny homes were an outcome of that. I fought the city on zoning. I championed the placement of the tiny home village in River North. I supported them. I was the only community member from outside the village to be invited to sit on their village community committee and help them navigate complex challenges. I have been an advocate in going to the mayor to try to bring resources and solutions that stop the sweeps and actually provide opportunity. So there are 3 ways to solve what's happening here, to make an impact. The first is housing, tiny homes, sanctioned camping sites. Whatever we can do to get our hands on housing in the immediate is going to be critical. Housing first. Number 2, the city can be a leader in coordinating all the service providers. We aren't doing that. There's people working on mental health, on drug addiction, on getting people into jobs. Nobody's coordinating all of those resources. And third, we need to build permanent supportive housing. Housing across the continuum is our only way out of this problem permanently. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question for you. It's 2 parts. How will you take steps to reduce single occupancy vehicle congestion in the city? And if elected, what will you do to increase pedestrian safety and fulfill the promise of Vision Zero and give specifics?
From an overarching perspective, as I said, it's time for Denver to have Denver-based solutions for our transit and traffic problems. So as your mayor, I'll come to you, the voters, and ask that we now establish a city Department of Transportation whose sole mission will be to focus on these issues of transit, mobility, transportation, and moving around the city. That'll be incorporated, ingrained, and made an integral part of the planning process. Specifically, what do? We try everything. We try everything, and we rely on innovation. We look at shuttle buses to move us from different points around the city. We approach RTD and see if we can put something together. They'll invest more in the inner city in helping us move people around than they do now. I understand their mandate is regional. I understand their focus has been suburban. But we pay taxes too, and as your mayor, I'll go to RTD and negotiate that we need a greater investment here. We need to invest in building more sidewalks in this community. There are portions of this House district that don't have sidewalks. Now, I understand when some of these neighborhoods were developed in the 60s, people didn't want sidewalks, but times have changed. So we need to build the concrete infrastructure to support the transit infrastructure, which will be bikes, which will be scooters, which will be skateboards. I'm not getting on a skateboard, but it'll be skateboard for some people, and walking, which is fine, which is healthy, and is something we ought to continue to advocate for and support.
Our city is certainly becoming increasingly complex in terms of the types of modes of travel we have to accommodate here. And that's part of the challenge. Transit, as I've stated, is a top priority for me. Getting a transit network built that actually connects us to our neighborhoods and where we need to go has to be a priority. And then making sure we are building multimodal, complete streets that accommodate all the modes, and investing in pedestrian infrastructure. I had a crazy thing happen working in the Rhino area in trying to put in crosswalks. And we had worked to fund putting in some crosswalks, and the city came back to us after we had purchased the crosswalks and said, we can't put in colorful crosswalks because they'll distract drivers. And I said, that's the point. We want to be able to put in infrastructure and ideas that allow pedestrians to be the priority. That has to be our focus. The other thing is the way we handle construction here makes it very dangerous. Lanes are closed, sidewalks get closed when construction happens, pushing people out into the street, and that is incredibly unsafe, especially at a time when there is so much construction happening all over the city. So addressing how we treat people at every level and prioritizing people first is the critical way that we keep our streets safe and accommodate the Vision Zero goals that have been set.
First, we have to start with the principle of valuing all life in Denver, not just privileging those who have access to multiple modes of transportation. So when we see the traffic fatalities in this city, they're often along corridors where people are reliant on public transportation. And so when we look at 50% of the traffic-related deaths are happening in 5% of our main arterials, that's problematic when people cannot safely cross the street, cannot safely get across if you are of limited walking ability or using a wheelchair. So that's one thing. The other thing is we've had a succession of mayors, all of them been male, by the way, who want to build bigger, shinier cities. And when you do that, you're also encouraging sprawl as opposed to focusing on local transportation issues that impact the rest of us. So I would want to have, looking at this village model in terms of growth concepts, in which I'm advocating for, is having transportation options where you can walk to or bike to close to where you're at. And I also just want to correct the record of something. I checked with Tiny Home Village organizers about the claim that Jamie Giellis continues to make about being critical of that effort. We need to have politicians to stop co-opting the efforts of community because they are doing the hard work, including to have affordable housing and safer transportation options. So let's give credit to where credit's due, not the politicians. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. How's everybody doing? Are we okay with maybe doing a lightning round, or would you like to have one more questions? I have one question that I'd like to have Alex, co-captain, talk about. And lightning. Okay, so here we go with the lightning round. Now, how many people like NPR? Huh? Maybe some. Yeah. All right, everybody heard of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, right? All right, well, these are actually one-word-ish questions. And we're just going to go real quick. I'm just going to go ahead and ask you one by one, you know, what is this, what is that? They're going to be light questions, and then there's going to be maybe a few deep questions that might have a maybe instead of a yes and no. You never know, and that's what we're after, right? So, wait, tell me, is this one, huh? Okay, first question. Do you support Measure 300? Lisa?
So a yes or no?
Yes or no?
I support the principles of it.
Okay. Penfield?
That's my answer.
Yes, I'm supporting it.
Jamie?
No.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. Question 2. What is your favorite form of transportation? Car, bus, bike, horse, unicycle, what? Lisa?
I'm a cyclist, so bicycling.
Oh, hey. Penfield?
My 68 Chevy van that's parked in the parking lot.
That's nice. All right. Jamie?
Streetcar in cities that have it, but here I like to bike.
Great answer. San Francisco, yeah, we got to think about something like that, but the buses down 16th Street Mall are pretty much great, huh? All right, your favorite book. Let's start with Penfield. What's your favorite book, Penfield?
Probably the Colin Powell autobiography.
Oh, nice. Jamie?
Ooh, that's a tough question, actually.
Favorite book?
Can
What
I
comes
say
to
can I
mind?
say a childhood book? This
Yes.
is kind of bizarre.
Oh,
Where
yes.
the Red Fern Grows. Does anybody remember that
Oh,
book? It's a
my.
great classic. Yeah.
That is a classic. Lisa?
The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, talking about mass incarceration and what we need to do to stop it.
Oh, relevant and great. Really great. Let me see. Number 4. We're only going to go to 10 on these, so I'm going to go as fast as I can here. Number 4 here, we got, do you support the National Popular Vote Bill or measure? Lisa?
Yes.
Penfield?
Yes.
Jamie?
Maybe.
Okay. We got a maybe out there. All right, that kind of opens up to, All right, number 5. We're going to start with you, Jamie, to answer this question. Would you advocate for Denver officially becoming a sanctuary city?
Ooh, does it have to be a one-word answer?
One-word answer, yes or no. Would you advocate for Denver officially becoming a sanctuary city?
Yes.
Excellent. Penfield?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes, I believe we need to protect our immigrant community.
Wow, they all agree. That is great. Everyone. Okay, now number 6. Do you support the import of prescription drugs into our city from Canada or other foreign countries? Lisa?
Yes.
Penfield?
The cost of prescription drugs is one of the largest drivers of, yes,
And the audience has
we need to
spoken.
manage our healthcare costs, and getting a whole handle on prescription drugs is where it starts.
That's great.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes, yes. We have 3. Okay. Kind of grew from there, didn't it? Okay. Now let's start with you, Penfield. Favorite color?
Purple.
Like it.
Blue.
Good answer. Especially in this crowd.
Well, my campaign colors, teal and plum, of course.
Cheers. That's 2, but if you mix them together, it makes some kind of tum color. Tum, tum, tum. Yum, yum, yum. Okay. Number 8. Now 8, 9, and 10. Because we've got to go ahead and wrap this up. It's lightning round. I just want to ask, what is the one word that first comes to mind? This is number 8. When you first think of Denver, just one word. When you think of Denver in the past. One word, Lisa.
In the past.
In the past. Up to date. What do you think of Denver?
From the past to up to date in one word.
Uh-huh.
I guess
We
it's
will-
the same. My home, Denver
My-
native, so.
Right on, native, okay.
Skies.
Good one. Beautiful.
If you put dashes between it, quality of life.
Quality of life, okay. So in the past, number 9 is, what is the one word that first comes to mind when you think of Denver today, right now? Penfield. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
I can't do it in one word. Needing new leadership.
Okay, leadership, new leadership. One-ish was the, that's parameters. Jamie.
Directionless.
Directionless today, good answer.
Power to the people and not developers.
Oh, right on. Okay, and our final question of this round would be, what is the one word that first comes to mind when you think of Denver tomorrow and in our future? Let's start with Jamie. Let's make it fair. Let's start on that end and go. Our future.
Boundless.
Oh, did I say that?
Thriving.
Yes, great answer. Penfield. Go to. I know you.
Mayor Tate.
Mayor Tate. Oh. Holy moly, that was a great push. That was a great push. Lisa.
Community driven.
Yes. Okay. Now, can everybody give our mayor candidate a hand? I'd like to thank you all for being here and taking our questions. We will be planning something like this in about a month or so. We want to really kind of keep the ball rolling for our candidates. I'm going to hand this back over to Lydia, and thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, you each have a minute for closure. That's here, you ready?
Okay, 1 minute.
Okay. 1 minute. I don't know who was the last one to go first here.
Well, I went first to open, so.
Okay, so why don't you go first? We're closing.
Thank you once again, House District 9, for having us here. You've heard a lot about what I stand for. I simply offer you this. It's time to focus on neighborhoods. It's time to focus on people. It's time to focus, period. And that starts by having a mayor who will show up, who will be responsive to you, who will be a partner with you in addressing the issues of the day. Whether it be environmental protection, whether it be creating affordable housing, whether it be helping the homeless, whether it be alleviating the traffic congestion on our streets. You deserve a mayor who will take charge immediately, who will respond to you, who will make sure that while we have to play in the sandbox with developers to build our city, we won't get played. We'll get what we need to make this the community we all want, that's people-centric, that's neighborhood-focused, and that elevates and works on the human infrastructure of our city. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Penfield Tate, asking for your support to be the next mayor.
You're going to hear a lot of things throughout this campaign, and I think what you need to focus on is looking for the individual who has shown the ability to be a bridge builder, a collaborator, who doesn't talk about themselves all the time, who talks about what they've done with community. There are no stories that have been co-opted here. I've done the work. I've done it here. I've done it all over the world, and I'll do it for you. I do this out of a place of passion and compassion. I believe that there's vision and there's strategy required of this powerful, powerful mayoral position. You need somebody who can do both. I can. I have proven it. I will do it. I want your support. I want your vote. I want your trust to know that the promises I make are the promises that will be kept. And I'll work endlessly and tirelessly for the people of this city. I'm Jamie Giellis. I want to be your next mayor. I hope I have your vote on May 7th. Thank you.
What you will have
having me as a mayor is what I have been in terms of authentic leadership in this city. I didn't have to be paid to be a consultant to work with community. I was on the front lines of fights to protect our parks, to protect our neighborhoods, to have better access to public spaces, to have fresh food. And that was done as someone who has been born and raised in this city, who has raised her family here. I have been through the various stages of growth in this city, both the good and the not so good. But what I bring is the vision of this city that we can come together because we've done it. You know, one of the hardest roles that are also one of the most underappreciated is as community organizer. And as a community organizer, you have to be a bridge builder. You have to listen to all sides of the issues and then move toward action. So I would be very honored and humbled to have your support to continue on in the fight, to challenge inequity in this city for the principles of equity, fairness, and justice. I'm Lisa Calderon, and I'm running to be the first woman mayor of Denver on the issues and principles of equity, fairness, and justice for everybody in this city. Thank you so much.